Good evening, everyone, from the Temple of Silence. This is Michael Robbins, and for a while I'll be substituting for Tuya, who's up at the Little Bear Meditation Center. One day maybe we'll have a Great Bear Meditation Center, but right now it's the Little Bear, and with the star Polaris in the tail, which is our present star of orientation, and is standing for the monad, just as the way the neighboring pointer star, Dubhe, stands for the personality in general, and the more distant pointer, Merak, stands for the soul. Merak under Aries and Dubhe under Leo, and maybe Sagittarius pointing the way involved with Polaris. Well, we know we have a lot of work to do behind the scenes as the pressure on humanity increases and big decisions are to be made. The United States is certainly not the center of the world, as some of its nationals seem to think, but it does still set a trend, and people regard what happens there with caution. Because it may be that they have the tendency to follow for better or for worse, really. So the election coming up is very important and will set an example, and it has to be with our full assistance as members of the new group of world servers, or, aspiring members of that group. We have to work with the hidden energies which help bring out the soul ray of the United States, and of course the soul ray of the other two nations which, with the United States, have much to do with the determination of the future of humanity, the Tibetan tells us. And those are the Great Britain, or maybe United Kingdom, but I think Ireland will eventually be unified, I suspect. And with Russia, which will bring in the seventh ray. So second ray for Great Britain, second ray for the United States, and the seventh ray. Two rays extremely important in the new age. And to be a true spiritual patriot, what does it mean? It has a lot to do with our thought power, the consecration of our thought power toward the building of the causal body of the nation in which we took our birth, or the nation in which we find ourselves along with the nation in which we took our birth, all subject to the wisdom of the overlighting soul. How will we give what we have? Our strengths, our virtues, so that causal body of our nation becomes stronger and stronger and more susceptible to the inflow of spiritual energies. We are individually building our causal body with the virtues we manage to extract from our daily living, And our nation is building its causal body, its Temple of Solomon, which will make it a much greater contributor to the overall comity or union of the many nations of the world. And finally, humanity, well, I should never say finally, because finally is very hard to reach, but at least as a goal, the building of the causal body of humanity, so that this great battle which is on right now between the angel of the presence of humanity and its causal nature on the one hand, and the dweller on the threshold of humanity, this great battle may be resolved in the right direction. And indeed, we are responsible. We think of ourselves, well, we're just little people and so forth, and from a functional point of view, on the outer plane, most of us are not outer political workers who can vote. Well, we can vote, but we do not immediately determine the legislation, the laws of the land, the direction of the developmental process. But as voters, indeed we can. And we can give our will to that type of legislation and those types of policies which actually do advance the spiritual qualities of our nation and of other nations and of humanity as a whole. And, you know, it is really, we have to get it into our minds, it is a great responsibility. And at this time, maybe even a grave responsibility, because the type of government which reflects hierarchy is called democracy. And we're not yet ready, I think, for true monarchy reflecting Shambhala. We've had, through the ages, strong individuals who have seized power, but it's not true monarchy with the enshrinement of the highest values, which one will work for sacrificially. Right now, we're simply trying worldwide to preserve a democratic form of government so that it becomes possible that the will of the people will actually be expressed, and may that will be guided by intelligence and love and wisdom. And that's where our educational function comes in. Now, in this wonderful little book called The Destiny of the Nations, written a long time ago, really, well, what is long, but, you know, written in the 1940s, and possibly some of it during the war, but much of it after the war. He tells us how to look for the best qualities of the various nations, and he gives us certain mottos. I think right now we have finished, well, we're not finished ever really, but we have at least given attention to the United States, United Kingdom, and Russia, and now we're looking at Italy, which was one of the combatants in the sort of Armageddon War which occurred, maybe the least offensive of the combatants, but certainly all of that has much changed since the time of the takeover of the notable fascists of the period. Things have changed for the better in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, in Japan. One would hardly recognize the forms of government which now prevail when comparing to the very militaristic approach that was current 75 years ago or more. So interesting about those nations, they had a lot of fourth ray. There's not one of them that did not have the fourth ray of struggle. The soul of Germany, fourth ray. The personality of Italy, fourth ray. And the soul of Japan, fourth ray. I guess we'll have to say that Spain had the sixth ray and not the fourth ray, but it was not on the same level. There was fascist activity. And again, you know, fascist activity appearing in the United States under the believing but not knowing sixth ray. And obviously a fourth ray mind in the United States, although he tends to emphasize mostly the soul and personality ray, and it's too early to speak of the monadic rays of these countries. So we're working with Italy right now. At least I wanted to take up what he considered to be the major nations. And one of the, well, all of that is changing rapidly, you know. China, which was embryonic at the time of this writing, in terms of its revolution and the form of communism which it undertook to follow, could not really be discussed fully. I'm sure it will be when he again begins to write before long, in whatever form that writing takes place, you know, but around the year 2025, China will definitely be a major nation. And India has always been a major nation, and there'll be a lot more there to develop. They have such tremendous population, as does China. One simply cannot do anything but count them among the major influential forces. So, you know, we have much along the political line to learn when DK writes again. And as he has promised to do in this series of what he calls bridging treatises toward the true knowledge of the New Age. Very exciting times we're living in, with the great possibility of raising humanity in general and much of humanity specifically into the fifth kingdom of nature, kingdom of souls, under the guidance of the fifth creative hierarchy of solar angels. So we're getting a lot of help from our friends, as the story goes, and at the same time fear in the brothers of darkness who want to do everything they can to stop the process from occurring in the right way. DK reminds us, though, they are brothers, and though they have traveled far into what he calls the land of distances, they will slowly return, suffering on the way, until at last they can get with the program of love, which is the program of this second major solar system. So it's the links between nations which are very, very interesting. You know, you take almost any ray and you will find important links between capital cities, between signs of the zodiac, between the nations themselves as a whole, and these links will determine the modes of constructive interchange which will characterize the ever fluid and flowing energy of Aquarius during the Aquarian age. moving towards universal love, as it says, or the principle of universality. Some of this I may have read, but I'll just continue. Again, in Italy, you find Leo appearing. It's the soul ray, right? Soul sign, thus relating Italy to France with its Leonian personality, which has caused much insistence on its own grandeur, but that, of course, will fade as well. And to Great Britain, with Britain having Leo as the ray, as the major soul sign of London, and hence the power complex that was there for a long time, and also the great drama which comes from Great Britain. You may wonder why Shakespeare and the Globe Theatre and all that was so prominent, and the Leo part of London is very strong. And then to Berlin, which I think has, I think it's Leo as the personality sign. I'll have to check that out. I know Scorpio is there as well. All of which have Leo as a ruling sign, either of the nations themselves or of their chief city. And when we talk about ruling sign, it can be soul or personality ruler. And remember that let's say you have certain rays that are prominent in a country. They generally represent the types of souls that have been attracted to that country. Right now, the majority of humanity has personalities which are on the sixth ray or third ray, and that's across the world. But when we say that in the United States the second and sixth ray are strong, that means that souls on the second and sixth ray tend to gravitate towards the United States. And inasmuch as United Kingdom or Great Britain has ray 2 soul and ray 1 personality, that souls on the first ray and second ray gravitate to that collection of countries. And that of course makes a lot of sense, because Rome, tends to be the source for many British people. That's what DK says, and of course that was a very first-rate civilization, at the time, regardless of what Italy is now. There is consequently, he says, no possibility of any of these four powers being able to evade relationships. Now, so, when the rays and when the signs are thus and so, the necessity of unevadable relationship, inevitable relationship will exist. Italy is more closely related to Great Britain than she is to France, because Rome is ruled by Taurus and by Leo. So, we have in Great Britain London in the soul nature of Leo, and in Rome we have Leo as the personality ray, the two major cities, which tie her to Great Britain through identity of vibration. This France will have to recognize, as well as Italy and Great Britain. So, you might think that maybe between Paris, London, and Rome there is some important relationship, even though Paris has earth signs, particularly, I think, Virgo, which tells us why Notre Dame, the great cathedral, is there, and I think Capricorn as well. I'll have to check on which is the major soul indicator. But there are, major alignments and sub-alignments and sub-sub-alignments and so forth. We have to understand what they are. The personality of Italy is ruled by Sagittarius, the sign of the one-pointed disciple, just as the personality of Washington, D.C., the great first race center, is ruled by Sagittarius. And it is owing to this that we have the undeviating aim of the Italian state and its refusal to move forward from certain attitudes and determinations. It's interesting how he talks about Sagittarius as having a certain fixity to it. And he talks about that in terms of the determinations that are made in Washington, D.C., a kind of rigidity, a one-pointed rigidity, which has been characterizing that city and its determinations. And when we look at religious fundamentalism, it has a lot of Sagittarius in it. Some people think that Sagittarius is actually the rising sign of the United States as a whole. And there's a certain rigidity of orthodoxy connected with the lesser development of Sagittarius. So, you know, that kind of fixity of the one-pointed disciple, which is very valuable, can be a fixity also in concrete-minded orthodoxy, which usually is narrow. Again, the one-pointedness of Sagittarius, rather narrow and non-inclusive. Of course, all of that changes when you have a strong Jupiterian determination in Sagittarius. Italy sees more clearly than Germany, I guess, at that time, the principles involved at this time, and though Rome is blinded by the Taurian influence, remember the old saying that Taurus rushes blindly until Sagittarius directs. Though Rome is blinded at times by the Taurian influence, which leads to a blind rushing forward towards a goal, irrespective of consequences and implications, yet essentially the inner straight line of foreseen and planned activity will hold Italy true to the objective. I suppose because, you know, Sagittarius is the personality sign, and we're not just, you know, not only dealing with the negative part of it. When we come to the bull, there is the blind bull of instinct and desire, and then when purification occurs, the eye opens and the bull sees where it's going. But since so many of our nations are operating according to their personality rays, that time of illumination is not yet with us. The following conditioning forces make the story of Italy sufficiently clear. Now, you know, we have had an attack of cosmic evil on the earth at various times. And interestingly, it's oftentimes associated with Leo. Now, the ancient Roman Empire, in which it was obviously present that negativity was a very Leonian and Eretan kind of expression. The sun is exalted in Aries, and the sun rules Leo, and we have the whole idea of the, not just the Republic and the Senate, but we had the dictator, you know, the Roman Empire under Leo. We also had a period under Leo, the Leonian personality of France, when the French kings ruled, and it was according to the Tibetan an evil time. And we have had recently in the Axis powers, again, a very strong Leo. The inner horoscope of Hitler says the Tibetan was ruled by Leo. Well, there's no way we would know that particularly. He did have Saturn in Leo, but he's talking about an inner horoscope, and that therein lies a difference. So Leo, a wonderful sign and of true identity, but very egotistical on the outer level. So mainly Leo is the sole ruler, however, of Italy, and the great glorification of religion and of art, and the great display. I mean, if you compare St. Peter's Cathedral with so many of the more humble churches found in other lands, you can see the magnificence of it. And there was a great Renaissance leader, Lorenzo the Magnificent. I have a feeling he had plenty of Leo in his chart. I do believe it is the case. So that great display of glory is there, but one day it will be the glory of true spirituality. And what is the motto? I carve the paths. Well, there are many paths to the spiritual level of tension that have to be carved. Sagittarius is the sun sign, in a way. It is the personality ruler, with its rulers Jupiter, the Earth, and Mars, and one of the reasons, along with the sixth ray soul, that Italy was so involved in inquisitorial matters as was Spain, with its sixth ray soul. Taurus rules the soul of the capital, and Venus and Vulcan are the rulers, Venus with its brilliant light and its beauty, eventually, and Vulcan with its powerful building, constructive aspect. And that has carried over, I think, into Great Britain, where Vulcan, as the ruler of the personality sign of Great Britain, Taurus, is very active. And then again, a double Leo. Leo is the external sign of the capital city, Rome. And we can certainly see that under the emperors of Rome, it was not the soul functioning. It was not a great enlightenment by any means, but it was all about power. And the misappropriated soul sign of the whole nation doubled up with the personality of the capital city, and you had a real powerful kind of power complex with all of the branching conquests of the within Europe. I mean, the Roman legions traveled afar on their conquering missions, and they meanwhile built roads and carved the paths. The soul ray, yes, the ideals, devotion, and the whole religious attitude, which makes it such an appropriate home of Western Catholicism, and personality, harmony through conflict, and many have been the conflicts, and also in the field of the artists and the religious arts, 6 and 4 coming through. And I'm reminded of Michelangelo and the kind of the story of him. And there was a movie. It was, I think, who played him was Kirk Douglas, who lived to be just recently 103 years old. And what we had there with Michelangelo was a fourth ray soul and a sixth ray personality, exactly the reverse of the soul ray and personality rays of the nation. At least that's how it looks to me. And then other indirect ray influences. Yes, I'm interested in them right now, but I'll tell you what, that'll be for next time. We have to get into our meditation at the moment. But you get an idea of an ancient culture, well, fairly ancient, before the time of Christ. And as a matter of fact, one of the reasons for his appearance as he did appear was due to I think the Tibetan refers to the wickedness of the Roman Empire and how this nest of cosmic evil had to be cleaned out. And it was so within the Hebrew group as well. The priestcraft had a pretty strong stranglehold on this source of Judaism, at least in those days. The Christ's appearance at the end of what looks like a 250,000 year cycle was very well timed, and there had to be he had to bring in the transition from the age of Aries, which both Rome and the Hebrew culture exemplified, and with the Hebrew culture even remaining there in Aries, says the Tibetan. He had to bring in the transition to the Piscean age, which is so important, and it was still in the major age of Aquarius, 25,000 years or so, maybe almost 26,000, but the impending lesser age of Pisces, and then after that the end of the great age of Pisces, and with Aquarius coming in. So there were many reasons why the Christ had to appear in the so-called Holy Land. DK says it's not really holy anymore, but at the time maybe, and it has been referred to since. All right, so I don't think it's right for me to go on and do any more right now, but let's just say on beginning on September 26th, if I'm the one who does this program, then I will continue there. September 26th, and it will be a morning session. I think it helps us to go into detail regarding many countries, because the more we know about any particular country, the more we will know about how they can relate to each other properly. And things have changed, you know. So colonialism is over, and the dominance of certain great European nations over developing nations is over, and nations are emerging along many lines, and the so-called white man's burden, as it has been referred to in the 19th century, is over, and the people are rising on their own, with their own values and their own idealisms and their own mottos. To think that that India was a kind of a colony of the Great Britain is a bit like the tail wagging the dog, you know, this ancient culture which offered humanity so much over millennia is dominated by the Great Britain, the British Empire at the time. Now that has, of course, ceased, and there are certain, astrological connections that are operating there. India with its first ray soul, and Great Britain with its first ray personality. And let's see if there's anything. Well, there are probably some, other factors that are operating there as well. Maybe along the, I'll just, study that. But let's just say that things have been restored more and more to the proper relationship as it should exist. Okay, so we'll take up these indirect relationships next time, and then we will have accomplished learning something about what Italy has given, what Rome has given, the complications which arose during the Leo misuse, we might say, and during the Inquisition and so forth, we will understand more of relational, international astrology. Okay, now let's go to some important matters here. And you know, we've just had a meeting of the Esoteric United Nations group, and maybe you'll want to be joining us. There's something very well supported in this group. One can just feel that it's something that hierarchy would like us to give our attention to as we learn about the souls of nations, the obstacles of the personality, and we evoke the soul. Our meditative life helps us to absorb the energy of the higher triangles. The liberated monad is within a triangle, whether it's the Father, Son, or Holy Ghost. The monad has 7 triangles on the monadic plane, and each one of us is connected with one of those triangles. The spiritual triad of every one of us is a triangle. The soul as well can be seen in a triangular counting, enumeration. These are the technicalities. And the personality is certainly a triangle with a point in the center, as it were. Lower mind, astral nature, etheric physical nature, and the personality synthesizing these, just the way the jewel in the lotus synthesizes a triangle on the soul level, consisting of the synthesis petals, the 9 usual petals, and the atomic triangle below. The jewel is the synthesizing point. And as we rise higher, we find the Christ and Sanat Kumara as the synthesizing points within the triangle. The point is that we can absorb these higher energies. And more we find that we can develop higher points of tension within the lower spheres, which are usually accessed through a lower point of tension. We can discern through spiritual discernment the presence of spirit in the forms of the personality. Now think about your own nation and list for yourself some of its virtues. VIR, virtue, strengths. how is it that each one of these nations in which we live will contribute to entry, the right kind of entry into the age of Aquarius? What is the major gift, or what are the major gifts which will really help humanity enter the Aquarian age, the gifts coming from your nation? Because every nation, and even every little protectorate or associated area, it has some kind of culture, some kind of value that it can contribute to the whole. Maybe it's easier to see in some of the greater nations that have been around a long time. But every one of these areas, these countries, has its own type of virtues. And it is up to us who live within these areas to understand what the spiritual motto might be. Sometimes the Tibetan gives those mottos, and maybe he will give more. Other times the mottos are a little bit more conventional, but maybe DK will fill that in. There's quite a number of, I think, quite significant nations for which he gave but partial information. Maybe enough to go on, though. So X, my nation, is offering to the world of nations the following virtues, and see if you can fill that in a little bit. And then think of yourself as an individual, and maybe of some of the groups in which you as an individual play your part. You have virtues also. We all do, because we have built them in over millennia, even over millions of years. So what is it you can offer to your nation to back up its virtues, to support its motto, to support its soul ray and its soul sign? Think about your gift to your nation, gift or gifts. And if we succeed in offering our gifts to build the causal body of our nation, we are in line with the will of the Christ and of Sanat Kumara as it tries to bring the great ray of love into expression, which will be a bit of a relief from the third ray personality of the planetary logos of the earth. So we try to see how our gift to our nation and its gifts to the union of the many nations contributes to a more cooperative, mutually supportive, international attitude. And all this on behalf of the reappearing Christ, the great Savior, the great teacher, the great educator, the great psychologist, and we pledge our cooperation to him as individuals and in our groups and in our country. And as the awakening soul of humanity, we pledge our cooperation. We have gathered in your name, Lord Maitreya. Be with us. We realize that we are helping to bring into expression also the work of the three great lords of liberation in Shambhala, connected with the air signs, Aquarius, Gemini, Libra, which will be so powerful during the air sign age of Aquarius. freedom, brotherhood, equality. The three great lords of hierarchy, Manu, Mahachohan, and Bodhisattva, will reflect these, and this reflection will make its way into our daily life. But it will require our willingness, our understanding, and our willingness individually, in our groups, and eventually in our nations which have turned onto the disciplic path. You wonder if there are many nations that are truly consciously disciples at this time, and mostly the best we seem to be able to expect is that they are aspirants now and then, aspirant nations. Maybe some more advanced than others in the process. And so we say the mantram of the will to align our will with that will which seeks to see the divine plan come into existence, into manifestation even on the outer plane where there is so much chaos and fear and, disorganization and all those inhibitory factors. But that can be occultly straightened out, as the Tibetan says, with the combination of the first and seventh rays, and always keeping the love-wisdom ray as the great support. In the center of the will of God I stand. Naught shall deflect my will from His. I implement that will by love. I turn towards the field of service. I, the triangle divine, work out that will within the square and serve my fellow men. So just feel yourself coming under the impression, under the influence of as much of the divine will as you may be able to fathom. I guess we can't fathom too much, but we can fathom something. For all of us, the road winds uphill all the way, and our spiritual progress using the divine will is anti-gravitational, and at the same time externalizing and manifesting. We go higher, we go lower into manifestation simultaneously. Until the great heart actually pours through all the nations of the world and all the divisions which are so obstructive. The divisions between nations cease. DK has said the day must come when the passport and all that will not be needed because people will be free to move from place to place. It's a great ideal, of course, and requires training, spiritual training of some kind for the great majority of human beings. Einstein also said, you know, when you're in a plane and you look down, you don't see the lines you see on a map. You see a kind of continuity. Maybe sometimes rivers or mountain ranges act as kind of barriers or lines of demarcation, but we certainly don't see what you see on a map, all these divisions. But that requires training. And that we can expect that training to come through the tendency towards universality that we will experience in the Aquarian age. So think globally, right? The DK has given us the method of doing so, and act locally. And I suppose the most local kind of acting is right within your own individual nature. Truly to serve according to the need you find around you. So let us close our reflection with the sounding of the great invocation, our most powerful instrument for bringing the hierarchy forward in the right way, for bringing the Christ forward in a way that he can be truly understood, and the fairy tales can be dissipated. We can have a more realistic view of what it would mean to have the light, the love, the power circulating between peoples and communities and nations and continents and throughout the entirety of humanity.